Hello and welcome. My name is Irina and you are on my Busy May Studio channel, which is about Procreate art, traditional art and other creative activities I love. If you are not a subscriber, make sure that you subscribe and follow me on Instagram, where I share a lot about my creative work, about my illustration, where I share tips and tricks of Procreate and many other things. So hopefully you'll follow. This video is a tutorial where in the center of which I'm going to put my Ethereal collection. It's a Procreate brush set, not the biggest one, but it's one of the most popular ones at the moment. And I get a lot of requests on how to use those brushes because they're quite different. Some of them are filler brushes, some of them are texture brushes, and there are even like shining stars there. I do get requests on how to use these brushes to their maximum potential, how to create illustrations with them. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you here now in this video tutorial. We are going to create this lovely artwork. I'm a big fan of prehistoric art and I'm a big fan of cave art, of Stone Age generally. And that's what I kept in mind when I created this ethereal brush set for Procreate. I'm mesmerized with textures, with colors, with natural pigments, and that's what I'm dedicating this set and this tutorial to. Over 30,000 years old, Paleolithic cave art reveals every human creativity and symbolic thought. Found in caves like Lascaux and Altamira, these artworks depict animals, humans, and symbols using natural pigments such as ochre, charcoal, and manganese oxide. Early artists applied paint with fingers, brushes, or by blowing pigment through bones. Today we're going to create this amazing bull. Our main purpose is to create this lovely textured illustration which keeps this tradition of prehistoric Stone Age art on cave walls. The techniques I'm going to show you, you can basically apply them to other brushes of your choice, but I'm going to dwell on the Ethereal set, Procreate set, and that's why I'm going to make you a short introduction of the set, just to make you a little bit more familiar in case you considering purchasing the brushes. So this set is not as big as some of my other sets, but I would say it's the most rich in texture and variety of textures, and at the moment it's my number one, my favorite. And I'm taking part in illustration challenge, and that's the set I've been using for a number of my latest illustrations. So I'm gonna show you. It's basically the brushes are textured brushes here. For example, there is this brush is called Premonition. I hope you see this delicate texture. It's more like you see this kind of like filler brushes. The Essence Fill is one of my most favorite ones. It's so versatile. It's a little bit of a wet media type. Look this beautiful layering it does. The more you press it down, the thicker the pigment is. And on the other hand, the lighter you touch the surface of your iPad, the lighter the trace of the brush is. There is this ghost brush, for example, that I'm going to be using in this class. See, it's kind of like appears, disappears, giving this nice texture. I find this ghost brush really nice for both under layers for the illustrations going forward. I'll explain what I mean. And also it's amazing for drawing animal fur. There are layering brushes that you can stack basically on each other to create beautiful effects. Like for example, this brush layering Decay. It looks amazing. It's probably a little bit too transparent, not opaque enough for filling, like with your main color. However, it's amazing for applying texture on top of your thicker layer underneath. Shadow Whispers. This got like more papery canvas type texture. This brush as well, like the more you press it down, the thicker the pigment is. There is also a number of brushes like with very delicate textures, like more hints. Like for example, the Celestial brush. See, it kind of leaves little splatters. And also delicate like Phantom, one of my favorite ones. It kind of, if you want to give your illustration a little bit like rough around the edges feel. Mist, for example, that's basically what it says it is. I like this one because it's sort of like wet media type as well. So you press it down and it gives you more pigment. However, you let it go a little bit, like pressing lighter, and it washes the edge off. So there is no sharp edge to your object. And also, of course, there are thinner brushes like for example, this number 1 Helper, that's generally a super versatile brush. It's probably the king of this set because it's texturized. If you see, like there is this rough texture, but it can act both as detail brush. Like for example, if you need to add some details to your illustration, or it can act as filler because it's thick enough to create a beautiful textured background. There is also Spirited, thinner brush. You can see that it's also a thinner type of brush, perfect for different details, and we'll be definitely using it in our tutorial today. However, it's quite different from number 1 Helper. It's probably best for this kind of thicker details because it's got this nice like concrete stony texture. And for Secret, that's just one of my most favorite. I love scratches, and I've got such a like big collection of different scratches that I use for my illustrations, for animals, for details, and this is another one of them which I think is great. I will also show you how to use it. Some texture. There is also Brightest Night. That's kind of bonus. I was considering whether to include it or not in the set, but I thought that it adds a little bit of a nice touch, like particularly looking nice as see, Starry Night. And I'm not gonna use it in this tutorial, but I find it like going with all of these brushes together. So if you use this brush set to create your character or your illustration, this is always a great complement to it. It just goes really well with those textures. So that's pretty much it. That's the set. And there are I wanted to say as well, there are a few brushes as well, like for example this Magus cloak or paperizer. They're really good for adding background textures, and I'm gonna show you as well how to just one of the options I use it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So you can purchase this set on my website if you want. If you don't, you can use the brushes of your choice. And you can download a couple of free goodies that go with this tutorial from my website for a simple favor of subscribing on my non-spam email, which is maybe once a month, once in 3 months, usually with some Procreate goodies, some discounts, and some news. You will definitely need your iPad Pro. You will need an Apple Pencil compatible with this iPad. My iPad Pro is 6th generation, 12.9 inches, and I've got Apple Pencil 2 that's compatible with this iPad. You will need the latest version of Procreate installed on your iPad. In terms of the resources, what you will need if you want to follow exactly step by step, you will need Ethereal set. You've probably already purchased it, so you will find this tutorial hopefully really useful, because I'm going to show you in detail how to use those brushes, how I use them in my illustrations. If not, go ahead and use the brushes of your choice. It would be actually really interesting to see a different effect maybe with some other brushes. You will need a default sketch brush from Procreate. I recommend the one I usually use. It's in the sketching group, HB Pencil. I use it as default brush when I need to make a quick sketch of something. And also you will need the overlay. It's a textured canvas that we're gonna place on top of our illustration before we start drawing and painting. You can, as I said, you can download it from the free resources section of my website. And you will also need the mini color palette that I'm going to be using in this tutorial. These are a few colors from the main color palette Ethereal, which comes with the brush set as well. But for this tutorial, you can download the free mini color palette. Before we proceed to using the Ethereal brush set, let's prepare our sketch and our canvas for our illustration. For that, I've created an A4 paper size. Also, it's up to you to decide whether you would like to create a screen size canvas, which will be perfect for web if you intend to upload your picture on Instagram or other social media or anywhere online on the web, because it's lower resolution. However, if you intend to print your picture or to get it printed, I recommend that you go for higher resolution. And in Procreate, you can click plus icon and select A4. And if you go to canvas information, you will see that it's high resolution 300 dpi. So the canvas is created, blank canvas, and let's first of all sketch our buffalo shape. I'm not going to dwell too much of it because that's not the point of this tutorial, but I'm going to just show you my quick technique that I use to basically to sketch any object, whether it's an animal or it's a flower or a bird. So as I mentioned in the tools and materials section, go to sketching group of your Procreate. It's one of the default brushes that comes with the software. Select the HB pencil and select any darker color of your choice. So I can select this brown one, I don't mind. And let's sketch our bull. Don't worry about the size of it because this sketch is for guidance only. If you sketch it too small, you can always stretch it, scale it up to fill the canvas, or if it's too big, you can always scale it down. So don't be too precious. Free your hand, whether it's your right hand or left hand, and let's start. So our bull is gonna be not the full body, but it's gonna be just the head and a little bit of neck. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start with simple shapes. I'm gonna start with a skull, and for the skull, I'm gonna sketch a simple square. Now I'm gonna add this sort of like snout part. I don't know if you call it snout in case of bulls. So that's basically my bull's head. I can already map the eye a little bit here. It's gonna be probably the cheek. The neck will be sort of like rectangle here, and I think the body will go a little bit here, but this part is not going to be fully visible because we're going to cover it with trees. And let's draw some horns. For that, I'm just gonna draw a simple half circle on top of the bull's head. It's like moon shape, so like crescent moon shape. So that's the base of my illustration. I'm gonna grab it. I'm gonna stretch it, as I mentioned before, and I'll probably bring it down a little bit. But before I do that, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna connect this sort of like sharp-edged shapes with a curvier line. So I'm obviously gonna make the head rounder. That if you want. And the horns will be, one will be on the front, on the foreground, and the other is coming out of that side of the head. So I'm just gonna outline this one. It's on the foreground because the bull is turned with sideways with us, and this will be a little bit shorter because it's sort of like further away. But again, it's a flat type illustration, so I wouldn't worry too much about anatomy and gesture and lighting and shading. So that's all. That's basically it. That's our bull ready. And if you wish, you can always delete, erase the lines that you don't need. See this sort of like sharp shaped lines. So that's our animal. I don't know what it is. It might be a bull, it might be a buffalo, it might be some sort of Taurus, whatever you prefer to call it. But I love the way it's turning out. So I think I'm gonna make it big. It's gonna be its portrait. And I'm gonna place it roughly in the middle of my illustration. So that's gonna be the portrait of my bull. And that's the sketch ready. And you can always rename it, call it sketch, so you don't get lost in your layer stack. Next thing we're gonna do, if you've downloaded the free resources, the next thing I recommend doing is something that I always do in my illustrations. I always add extra texture. Despite the fact that the brushes I'm going to be using are very textured, I always use a texture overlay. It kind of brings the illustration on an absolutely different level, especially this cave art, natural pigment, wall texture look we are going for in this illustration. That's going to be extremely helpful. So if you downloaded the free resource from my website, go to the range icon, click add, and depending on where you saved your file, whether it's in your camera roll or it's in your iCloud drive, just put this texture. So you see the texture is dropped on top of your sketch. I'm gonna scale it up so there are no white edges left. And it's done. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna change the blending mode to color burn. Look how seemingly this texture disappeared, but this overlay will be very, very visible when we start painting. I'm gonna drag the sketch on top of the stack and reduce the opacity. That's an important thing as well. We only need sketch for guiding. We're not gonna use it as outline or anything. So I've reduced the opacity of my sketch to approximately 22%, and I'm gonna lock it. And finally, the last thing I'm gonna do to prepare the canvas for painting, I'm gonna change the background color. At the moment, it's clean white, like purest white, but I want to make it slightly more natural color, like closer to the stone wall. For that, in Ethereal mini set, I'm gonna choose this very first on the top left swatch, and that immediately changed my canvas into this nice sort of like papery, cavey wall type texture. By the way, to check how this overlay texture works, just switch it off and switch it back on. You can see that this is a beautiful texture, giving our illustration this authentic cave art look. So now we can start coloring our bull. The first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create an underlayer for my character, for my bull. This will be very important. This is a very important step, and you will understand going forward because the brushes I'm gonna use for coloring the character, the subject of our painting, are not super opaque. So we will need the underlay when we start working on the background. So I'm gonna create a new layer, and I'm gonna drag it between my background and inserted overlay. It's the new layer, and that's where I'm gonna grab. So I'm gonna go to my Ethereal set. I'm gonna select the ghost brush, and that will be my sort of like underlayer because it's one of the most opaque brushes in the set. So I'm gonna grab this off-white color in the bottom of the palette, and this is what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna fill the entire bull with this off-white color with a ghost brush. Disregarding the details or anything, I'm just going to create. Imagine that you're cutting a paper silhouette of it. So that's what we're going to do. So that's me having filled my bull with one layer of this off-white color of the ghost brush. You can see there are seams here because it's a layering type of brush, so I don't mind that. I'm not bothered about that too much. A little bit here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna duplicate to make it more opaque, and maybe duplicate again, and that's it. So it's done. I'm quite happy. The colors I'm gonna layer on top of this underlay are gonna look beautiful. The background colors that we're gonna add in the end, colors and effects, are not gonna affect our character. It's gonna be very independent and standing out. The only thing before we move on to coloring, I would like to add a little bit of a fluffy edge to the bull, because it's gonna be fluffy bull, and the only thing I'm gonna left unfluffy is the horns. So for that, I'm gonna take the Sacred Smoke brush. I'm gonna increase the opacity to 100%, and I'm gonna reduce the size to maybe about 25%. Let's try. Smaller size will give you obviously smaller effect, smaller fluff. Larger size will give more fluff. So I've tried, and I think maybe around 45% I'm quite happy about. So I'm gonna just go around the edge, with the exception of the horns, and I'm gonna give my bull with this with the same off-white color. I'm gonna give the bull this fluffy effect. You may not properly see it at the moment, this fluffy effect, but I promise you, once we start coloring, you will appreciate the effect this brush gives your character. So now finally I can say that our underlay is ready. So now let's move on to the actual coloring of our bull. I'm gonna create a new layer. and I'm gonna clip it as a mask to my underlay, so it stays sort of like within the lines and don't go anywhere further. And the very first layer I'm gonna put down, I'm gonna take the Essence Fill brush, and the color I'm gonna use is this light brown orangey ochre color. And the opacity, I think I'm gonna reduce the opacity of the brush to around maybe 50%. And the size on the contour I'm gonna increase to around maybe 65%. And I'm just gonna fill. Don't worry that it seems like it's blending into the background. The second layer is gonna cover. Leave the horns uncolored because they're gonna stand out as like lighter objects. I'm not gonna get rid of this kind of stains because the stains is something that I actually really like, and that's also part of the effect I'm going for this cave type art. So you see here and there, I'm just adding this nice gentle coloring, a little bit darker in some parts, like for example, like naturally you will have darker areas on top of the head. Depends on where your source of light is, of course, but we are not going for light and shade. It's a flat illustration, so that's it. Next thing, I'm gonna take the Sacred Smoke brush again, and I'm gonna now color again the bull, which I've just colored, on a new layer, clipping mask, and I'm gonna use the variation of these three colors. See, this, and this three on the top. So I'm gonna start with the one I used previously, probably reduce the opacity a little bit just to make sure the color is not too intense, and the size probably around 50%. And I'm just gonna start coloring. This brush, Sacred Smoke, it's actually amazing. The texture of it, it's so good. It's like this sandy, concretey, cavey wall texture. Now I'm gonna grab this yellowish color and I'm just gonna mix it in some areas. No particular way, no rule, just mix these colors together. And I'm gonna grab this sort of like reddish brown, and I'm gonna add some accents of this here and there. And that's the main color is layered. If you switch the sketch off, you can see why we added the fluffy edge on our white layer, if you remember, just to give our bull this fluffy edge. Also, if you prefer, you can always mix the colors together. For that, I would select the smudge tool and I would choose Sacred Smoke as a mixer with increased opacity. And if you feel like some colors have too harsh borders, edges between them, just mix them together with a smudge tool, but non-essential, because that's sort of like the rough type of art we are going for, cave art. I wouldn't bother too much about imperfections. So that's our main color layer done. Now let's add some more contrasting areas here and there. I would like for that to create a new layer. Use it as clipping mask as well, and I'm gonna right away change the blending mode to multiply. And the brush I'm gonna choose is layering decay. That's a like typical layering brush. The color I'm gonna use is this still ochre brown color, but this time I'm gonna lower the opacity to maybe around 30% and increase the size of the brush to around maybe 60% and see how it's gonna work. And I'm gonna add some darker areas. Not a lot. I'm only gonna add a little bit on the snout, a little bit on the back of the head, a little bit here, tiny bit under the head on the neck, just to separate the neck and the head, and maybe here in the bottom a little bit, and that's it. And now I'm gonna grab this brown color, which is the third one from the left in the very bottom, and I'm just gonna re-emphasize some areas, like a little bit on the snout, a little bit here, and a little bit there. You can see this lovely textured layering going on. No perfections, just have fun. So that's it, that's the darker areas emphasized. Now the body and the head of our bull has been colored. Let's look at the horns now. Also, it's up to you whether you want to go back to your white layer and tidy these edges up, but I kinda like it this way because in this type of illustration, the less perfect it is, the better, the more authentic effect is achieved when you leave it like a little bit like untidy, if you know what I mean. So, but I'm gonna do some work on the bull's horns, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a new layer and clip it as a mask on top of my layer stack. The brush I'm gonna use is Magus Cloak. It's a very like materially type, like almost potato sack type of texture. The color I'm going to choose is this yellowish color, the third one from the left on the very top row, and I'm going to use a very low opacity, maybe to 40%, but a big size of it, maybe 90%, 90-odd%. And with a very gentle touch, I'm going to add some of this kind of glow to the horns. Why I do that? You can always leave them white, but the reason I do that because this adds to the feel of the natural animal's horns, you know, because if you've ever seen, so it's usually like the shades of gray brown type, and it perfectly goes in our concept of cave art. But also, once we make the background much darker than this in the very end, I like how these horns, they sort of like look like there is a crescent moon on top of this bull's head. You can play around, you can actually create add the glow around it to create this effect like it's wearing a moon. Maybe it's some sacred bull, you know. So there's so many things you can do, but I just added a few stains with Magus Cloak here and there. And now I'm gonna grab Spirited brush with the same color. You can do on the same layer. I'm just gonna reduce the opacity, and I'm gonna reduce the size because I want this effect to be barely visible. And what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna, with this sort of like lines, follow the shape of the horns. I definitely don't want it to be too intense because I still want the horns to be in contrast with the rest of my bull's body. So I'm just gonna probably reduce the opacity so this like effect is only tiny visible, very, very slight. So and now I'm gonna just leave it at that. Now let's move on to the facial features, and for that I'm gonna switch the visibility of my sketch back on, and on a new layer I'm gonna grab the number 1 helper brush, and the color I'm gonna use is this off-white color to create the bull's eyes white. Let's reduce the size a little bit, full opacity, and we'll probably need to duplicate it as well just to make it even more opaque, the eye. And I'm just gonna simply draw the eye just like I usually do, and I'll probably duplicate it to make it even brighter. And now I'm gonna create a new layer and use it as clipping mask because that's gonna be the iris of the eye. I'm gonna use the same brush, number 1 helper. The color I'm gonna use is this darkest brown in the very bottom row, and I'm just gonna draw this sort of like half circle. It's up to you if you want to add a highlight. This time I'm not gonna add any highlights to the eye because I just want this authentic cave art effect preserved. I think the eye is too small. I'll probably grab both layers, take the move tool, making sure that uniform is selected. I'm just gonna drag it like this, making the eye bigger. Yeah, I like it like this. And to emphasize the eye a little bit, I'm gonna create a new layer. You don't have to clip it. I'm gonna change the blending mode to multiply, and with the same brush, number 1 helper, I'll probably reduce the opacity a little bit. I'm just gonna, oops, that's a little bit too dark. Probably this color I'm gonna use, our go-to color, and I'm just gonna emphasize the top lid of the eye. And you can always go even further, create a new layer with the same brush, number 1 helper, with 100% opacity and the reduced size. I'm gonna grab this sort of lighter color, and I'm just gonna create a little bit of detailing around the eye. And I would probably grab the smudge tool. You can keep it with Sacred Smoke brush, reduce the opacity, and if you go on the layer with your eyes, with the bull's eyes white, I'm just gonna smudge a little bit of the bottom of the eye, and that's it. That's our eye done. And next thing is the cheek. I'm gonna create a new layer and immediately change the blending mode to Linear Burn. And the brush I'm gonna use is Shadow Whispers. And I'm gonna grab this pinkish red. You can play around with the opacity a little bit. And I'm just gonna make the cheek going on. I'll probably grab the eraser tool and erase a little bit of it so it kind of ends on the jawline. And that's the main foundations of our bulls ready. Now let's move on to the fun part of adding the background. I'm gonna switch the sketch off. You can even delete it because we don't need it anymore. And what I recommend that you select all these layers and group them into one. That will be our bull. And I'm gonna create a new layer and I'm gonna drag it underneath the bull layer, so between the background and the character. This is your area of where your creative intention flows, so you can do literally whatever you fancy with this, but I'm gonna show you how, like, the way I see this illustration going. So I'm gonna immediately change the blending mode to multiply, and the very first brush I'm gonna use for the background is Premonition. It's like a smoky brush. You probably remember that I used it at the beginning. And let's try. This is too red, so I think I'm gonna grab this sort of like lighter brown in the very bottom. I'm gonna reduce the opacity and I'm gonna reduce the size to 100%. And what I'm gonna do with light touches, I always recommend starting light, because in case you need more intense color, you can always add layer, and the more layers you add, the more interesting and complex your artwork is. So let's start light, and I'm gonna increase the scale, bring the size a little bit closer so you can see the texture effect of this brush. I think it's beautiful. I always praise my own brushes so much, guys, but it takes me so long to work on them, and I'm in constant search. And once I kind of play around with them enough, I think, now I need to create another set, because it's just, I need that effect or this effect. So it's basically, it's creative process. It's always work in progress. A little bit here and there. I always find it that when you add a little bit more, maybe darker, and most edges darker color, it kind of frames your illustration nicer. Try some other colors. So this time we tried brown, so let's try this ochre brown. Here and there we are trying to sort of achieve the effect of the cave wall, which I think these brushes just do brilliantly. I have all respect for them. Right, that's the first layer done. Let's create another layer, and let's immediately turn it into linear burn blending mode. And this time the brush we're going to be using is Paperizer. It will give us this papery effect. Let's reduce the opacity, always a good practice when you add background. And the color I'm going to use is this lighter brown, and let's see how it's going to work. So I'm going to press the brush down. You see? Let's add some reddish color. See, you don't need to paint. Sometimes it's just a question of like rubbing a little bit on the surface of the iPad, applying more pressure in the middle of your stain, and when you go to the edges, just push the paint with lighter motions away. That was Paperizer. And let's add a little bit of more texture. Let's change the blending mode to darken. And let's grab the Night Clouds brush, which is another one of my favorite ones. I'm going to increase the opacity, reduce the opacity a little bit to maybe 30%. And the size I'm going to leave at 100%. And I think I'll try and use this darkest brown. And careful with this one, because it's quite an intense brush. So I'm just gonna, again, you see, with the same motion, if you tilt the pencil a little bit, just don't want to add here, press it down, and that kind of creates this beautiful, look at this. This brush is quite unpredictable because it's not definitely a filler brush. It just literally adds some effects here and there. And that's our background. But that's not it. Let's add some trees. The trees we're gonna add will be two types: background trees of darker colors and the foreground trees of lighter colors. So I recommend grouping the background layers that we've just created into separate groups. So you can always rename the groups, of course, just for your own convenience. This is background, this is the bull. And the trees, first of all, we're going to start with the background trees. It's going to be on top of the background layer. And I'm going to turn the mode into multiply. And the brush, which I find most suitable for this task, will be the Essence Filler. It's very universal, versatile brush. There's so much you can do with it. So I'm going to take it, and the color of my trees is going to be this petrol blue color. And let's see. So I think the opacity is going to be around 40%. You can always go several times over the same area. And the size, I'm going to alternate to create different line weights, different thickness of lines. So I'm just gonna, no rules applied here. I'm just gonna draw different trees here and there. The effect will be even nicer if you alternate the opacity of your branches, and that will create the effect that some trees are further away, some closer in the wood. So for example, see, I increase the size and I reduce the opacity so it's barely visible. And I'm just going to create a tree in the background, and it immediately creates the effect that it's further away while the darker branches bring it closer. So this effect, like our bull, is in the middle of the deep dark woods, which is very ethereal, isn't it? So that was the dark trees, and let's add some light trees on the background. On the foreground. For that, I'm going to create a new layer on top of the bull layer. And the brush I'm going to use is again #1 helper. And I'm determined to show you the versatility of this brush because that's what I'm going to use it for. I'm going to grab this lightest color, it's off-white, and I'm going to increase the size, and I'm going to put a few thicker branches on the foreground. And finally, let's add something that I call finishing touches. And for that, we will need another favorite of mine for a secret. So there will be two types of finishing touches. There will be darker ones and lighter ones. So let's start with the darker ones. On the background, on top of our background, I'm gonna add another layer, and I'm gonna immediately turn it into multiply because I want it to blend in nicely with the dark background. And I'm gonna probably increase the size of the brush and the opacity 100% because this brush is already quite delicate, so we want it to be visible. And I'm gonna choose this lighter brown color, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add thinner, scratchier branches of the trees on the background. And now let's add a little bit on the foreground. So I'm gonna create a new layer on top of this white trees. Change the blending mode to multiply again, but this time I think the color I'm gonna use is this ochre brown. And the second type of the finishing touch is the light scratch, and I'm only gonna add on the foreground. I'm gonna create a new layer, keeping it on normal blending mode, and I'm gonna grab the lightest off-white color. I'm gonna keep the opacity to 100%, however I'll reduce the size a little bit. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add some texture first of all on my bull. So this type of motions like indicating the messiness of its fur. You can choose whatever type of texture you want. You can, oops, just deleted everything. You can use that type of scratch. You see, it kind of creates more like straight type of fur. But I think for this bull, or maybe it's a yak, you know, like that type of like prehistoric bull. I'm gonna add a little bit of detail here, like as a nose. I think this sort of like circly motions do the best job. And for fun, you can add different sort of like random symbols here and there, like for example that type. That's probably have to do little with the actual prehistoric art. It's more like some sort of Mayan symbols, but it gives this sort of ancient vibe. And that's it. As simple as that. Your illustration of the bull, buffalo, Taurus, yak is ready.